I am Jimbo Paris, and you are listening to The Jimbo Paris Show. All right, how's it going, everyone? I am Jimbo Paris. Welcome to The Jimbo Paris Show. And today we have Terry Rich. Mr. Rich is probably one of the most interesting people I've seen. He helped solve the largest U.S. lottery fraud. He's a fraud expert, speaker, author, and he has transformed many people's lives through his expertise and influence. So I'm interested to know. Let's see what he has to say.
How are you doing, Jimbo?
Great.
You
How are you?
crazy in that introduction, though, man. Like having fun. I love being part of shows. I always learn a couple of things myself in this, but I think by the time we're done, people realize I bounce all over the place. I love giving new ideas, thinking new ideas, and finding ways to help people from all the years I've learned, and also learn a little bit from folks like you.
Thank you again. So the show's about you. So let's start. What is it that you specifically do?
Well, at this point, I'm a professional speaker, author, and I've even got a couple of TV shows that are about to come out. So I love doing a lot of different things. And it started, I grew up on a farm, if you can believe that, in a small town in Iowa. And when I grew up, I got lucky because we had no, I didn't realize this at the time, but we had no money, but we had happiness beyond belief. Great family environment, parents who were very encouraging and encouraged me to try things that I might fail on, but always trying those new ideas. And when I went through college and realized I could talk and make a living, I got into television and radio, and it started in cable television. And I was lucky because all my buddies went to broadcast TV, and I learned quickly that this entrepreneurial company called Heritage Communications was just the right fit, where everything we touched was brand new. We helped start CNN and MTV and all these different cable channels. And it really was so much fun. And you were really rewarded to try something new, even if it failed, because down the road, it seemed to succeed in cable television at the time. And whoever thought when I was door knocking, people would say, I don't need more than 4 channels. I'm not going to pay $6 for additional television, the amount of money we'd be paying today. Well, that turned out to be a fun deal. And ultimately, when I turned 40, sometimes we go to work for someone thinking we're going to be there all our life. At age 40, I learned something my dad always said, work till you're 62 for somebody and, get your retirement, you're going to be happy. And I realized happiness really happens on the way to success. And at age 40, a group came in to try to buy the company. And so we cashed out. And all of a sudden I had all the money that I thought I would have when I retired. I'd seen a lot of the country and the world at that point with this company, and all the excitement of Hollywood that went along with it. So I started my own company. And so I had my own company doing television production. Free previews of HBO is how we started it. So you could see HBO, and then at the end would say, hey, if you enjoyed that movie, now's the time to call, that sort of thing. And that went really well for 10 years, but I just decided to get off the road at age 50. And I got a call, said, would you be interested in running a zoo? Well, grew up on a farm, had cows. Why couldn't I run a zoo? So we got to turn around a zoo. It was really fun, be a zoo director for 4 or 5 years and build it into the second largest cultural attraction, put it in the black, and raise about $15 million in endowment, so it'd be around forever. And at that point, the current governor at the time called and said, hey, the lottery director's ending, so would you be interested in running the lottery? Well, never done that either. And over those 10 years, I got to give away $1 billion in monies to people and prizes and solve the largest lottery fraud in U.S. history. So that all came together, and I ultimately said, I got to retire, and started being on the road talking about the fraud case that happened that we just discussed that was solved with 2 hot dogs and Bigfoot, and/or talking about innovation, new ideas going through the entrepreneurial stage of my life. So that's my history, and I'm still having fun. I've got kids and grandkids around, so it's pretty good times.
Okay, so what I could get from there is that you've done close to about 4 big things: television production, zoo, lottery, and you're a speaker and an author. So
yep, and my own companies.
I was going to ask how long you've been in the industry, but I would have to be like, how long have you been in all four of these industries? You know?
Well, I just turned 70, so I actually started working on a farm when I first, heck, we were, feeding hogs and combining beans and doing all that all the way up. And I also learned in all of this. Someone asked me, if you were 21 again, what would you tell people to do to learn to be successful? And I said two things. One, I tell them, no matter who you work for or with, raise your hand and volunteer for everything. If I went in and the boss said, "Hey, we need to clean the bathroom," and everybody would look around, well, I can't believe the person's gone. Well, I'll do it. What the heck? Because you get noticed. The second thing I'd do differently is try to figure out how to relax a little more. When you have, if you're in your own business or you have success with a project, it's really tough to slow down. And I'm still trying to figure that out, of how to live life a little bit easier. But I've always had two jobs going no matter what I did. Right now it's retirement and the speaking gig. And then I've got a couple of TV shows I'm working on. There's always something going on, but that's what makes life fun, I think, Jimbo.
You have a couple of TV shows going on. So what are those going to be about?
Well, the first one, it was a documentary on this whole Eddie Tipton lottery fraud that made national news, and CNBC's American Greed did an episode on it already, and there was an hour show on it. But the actual background, Eddie and the guy that prosecuted, Rob Sand, a great prosecutor, and I all had contact from various producers looking to do some sort of a movie or something with that. So that one is been in production, out of production, COVID, all that sort of thing. The other one was a crazy show idea out of the blue, called Soccer Slam. We produced a show, and I had my own TV production company because I wanted to have something that was an asset that might pay year after year rather than work for hire, which is what I was doing. So we created a show figuring that WWE was the number one show on cable television. And that's with wrestling. When you're a wrestler, you wrestle in high school and maybe a little bit in college, but then you're done. Well, WWE takes those wrestlers, bulks them up, and then does a storyline with it. And I thought, well, what other sport at the time in the 1990s, they're not paying the professional players very much, and we might be able to do the same, put a storyline together. And I thought, soccer. This was before soccer was really popular in the U.S., so we did 4 shows for Fox Sports World and then Galavision called Soccer Slam, full contact indoor soccer, so that we hired stunt guys to do fights, and they were knocking each other around. We threw 2 balls in at once. We had a brown card in case somebody broke wind. You got a brown card. So we just had some absolute crazy stuff going on the whole time. Well, it kind of disappeared as we got busy doing other things and making more money on other projects. And a year ago, theathletic.com, a big sports website, found that show, and they wrote a whole 25-page article about the whole making of Soccer Slam. And then a television producer called and said, "Hey, we'd like to do a documentary on that." Well, they got the documentary done, and it's going to premiere here. I don't think I can publicly say, but it's going to premiere in November on the Hearst streaming services across the United States on the making of Soccer Slam. So that should be kind of fun to do and see too. Something completely different than all that other stuff we talked about.
Okay. So this is all very, very good information. And I think for the majority of this interview, we should focus in on kind of the aspect of what you focus on primarily now. So what drove you to take all this success and become the speaker and author that you are now?
Sure. And I always say, when I do these kind of things, and I'm a promoter, so it sounds like all this guy's ever had was success, is that failures are the first step to success. I had somebody ask me in an interview, haven't you ever messed up? Haven't you ever screwed up? Absolutely. And even as I do things today, I've got all sorts of ideas that I've tried but failed. And it's important. I always say it's better to have tried and failed than to succeed at doing nothing. And I love having 2 or 3 things going all at once. And so my drive is trying to just look at, as you and I are talking, and or if I'm driving let's say I'm driving to the store and I make it in 2 minutes and 15 seconds, how can I do it in 2 minutes and 13 seconds? How do you improve upon things today that might be beneficial to others, to help others? And the zoo is a good example about giving back to the community. The lottery was a lot of fun financially and just promotion wise, but this is probably the greatest, the speaking business. And I have 2 books, which they said you need a book if you're speaking. It gets you more money for when you're speaking. But the speaking business is absolutely the greatest retirement gig in the world because you get called up, they pay you to fly somewhere in the world, somewhere in the United States. They pay you, they put you up, they pay your transportation. And then I always spend 2 or 3 extra days and get to see the sites, and it's all paid for. And so it gives me a whole new option to learn, to grow, to keep my eyes open on all the different cultures, all the different diversity that's happening around the world, and the new things of what the world might be in the future, as I hopefully can pass that along to others and also to my family and kids, or my kids and family.
Okay. Okay. And you mentioned the lottery a few points. So I have like 2 questions here. So, well, actually 3. But let's ask the first one here. So, how long have you been in the lottery industry?
Okay. The lottery business, most people, when you play the lottery, it's run by your state, and they have a whole staff there. Usually, once you get into a lottery in the state, in your state, they stick around for their entire career because it's really a fun job. You make people happy. It's everybody's, it's big money. It's all the good things. The director, which I was one, in states are appointed by the governor. And in our state, you had to be confirmed by the Senate. And it's like a political appointment. You're in for 4 years. So, the background that they were looking for at the time that I got on and then was reappointed 2 more times by different governors, they were looking for promotions and marketing and just increasing the bottom line. And as a lottery director, you think your job is to sell more tickets. I really didn't want to look at it that way. I thought our job was to keep the game fair and honest. And yes, we can increase tickets, but if you're over promoting and over promising, you're hurting people, right? You don't want people to go out and spend their entire savings account. You want them to spend a few dollars from their pop bottle money or taking the cans back or whatever to do that. You don't want to affect lives in a negative manner, but people like to gamble. And lotteries weren't around. They were for years. And then Louisiana had a major scandal. And so they outlawed lotteries until about 1952. And so lotteries really have only been around for the last 40, 50 years and full-fledged again. And the reason that I like states running them is at the time, the mafia, organized crime were running lotteries. And so you really didn't know who you were playing or whether those games were fair and honest. When you play the lottery, you know where the lottery office is, you know who your governor is, you know who your representative is. You have somebody you can go talk to if you don't think they're fair and honest. And I think that's a big plus to what lotteries are today. And there is a little bit of a throttle where some states don't allow you to use a credit card, or you have to be 21 to do that. It isn't full-fledged of let's just take your money at all costs, and you hurt a lot of people. Now, people overplay, no doubt about that, but you try to put in checks and balances as the director to kind of oversee to those that want to play. And let me tell you, people love to gamble. I could say I got my Diet Coke here. People could say, well, I'll bet you $500 that, and somebody would take that bet. It's just crazy to me. So I like that someone's running it that answers to the people that are playing it.
Okay. So you mentioned here keeping lotteries fair and honest. So obviously, if you're trying to keep them fair and honest, you're going to be combating against something called fraud. So what is sort of the definition of fraud, or what sort of is your personal experience with it?
Well, as a CEO, I always thought if the auditor came in and audited the lottery, we were free and clear. But I realized after doing some research that only 2% of all internal frauds, about 2 to 4% are found by auditors, outside auditors. Most fraud in an organization is found by the employees or vendors who are too close to employees in the organization. I'm a marketer and promoter. You can probably sense that. I talk a little fast. I go a little strong. I like selling stuff. But in this job, about a year into it, I had someone call and say, hey, we got a problem. I said, what's the problem? Well, we have this jackpot called Hot Lotto, which is played by about 21 states, pooling their money together to try to get bigger jackpots. And we had somebody win. Okay. Well, and that person hadn't come in for almost 11 months. Well, that's weird in itself. If you have a $16.5 million annuitized jackpot, even Bill Gates, I think, would want to come in and claim it. So we knew something might be screwed, but then we got a call from a lawyer in Canada who said, hey, I'm just going to send you the the ticket, you send me the money. Ding, ding, ding. Something didn't feel right. So they said, hey, we don't think we should pay it. And I thought through it, and I thought, yeah, that's right, because if you pay it, you may never see the money. If they sue us, which is likely, then we'll have to go to court, but then a judge decides and we can research a little bit. But if you pay it, that they'll take off if it's illegal and you'll never see them again. So we decided not to pay it. And all of a sudden, through the next month and a half before the claim was to expire, we had someone from New York try to come in and claim it. And we found out that they were claiming it as a corporation in Belize, where a lot of illegal activity happens. And they were claiming it on behalf of a guy named Philip Johnston, who was the guy in Canada that made the original call. So something just didn't feel right, but we couldn't tie it all together. And it took about 2 or 3 years, and our diligent Attorney General's office and the Department of Criminal Investigation to go talk to those two gentlemen in Canada and in New York. And they both got that awful question I hope you and I are never asked. Do you want to be the defendant or do you want to be the witness? They both, by the way, decided to be the witness, and they gave up somebody in Houston, Texas. And when it all came down to it, we figured out by showing the video of the purchase of the ticket that people started identifying that. Remember, we talked about employees or anonymous tips, or where most fraud's found. We found that it was an employee of a vendor who does the drawings for all lotteries across America. And that employee was a security officer, and he was best friends with a guy in Houston, and his name was Eddie Tipton. And lo and behold, when it's all said and done, he got up to 25 years for creating this fraud by rigging the computer that was drawing those numbers. Now, Powerball and Mega Millions drawn by balls, as you've seen. But this was drawn by a computer, and when it's programmed by the same guy, we knew something was screwy, and ultimately we got him to confess and sent to prison.
Now, sort of, when we talk about this programmer, and did the security guy get in trouble too, or was he?
The programmer was actually a security guy too, and
Okay.
One of the things I learned in all this, and this is probably the best lesson if people have their own little business, little or big business, is the American Society of Fraud Examiners said there are 3 things that will create fraud in any organization, whether it's a church, the church secretary, or a school, or a great big company. One is financial need. Now, you and I both would like to have more money. I don't care how much we have. We'd like to make just a little more money. That's not the financial need we're talking about. Usually, if you hire a really good employee and they're great for 3 or 4 years, they go through a divorce, they lose half their money, they maybe have a gambling problem, a drug problem, credit card problem. That creates a need of, I got to get some money and I got to get it now. But the second thing they have to be able to do is have the opportunity to steal it. And that usually is in a small organization where you have somebody who writes the check and writes the purchase order. They have all the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. And that's what happened here. This guy wrote the program. He compiled the program. He oversaw the computer. Nobody really oversaw him. So you got to have checks and balances within an organization. The third piece in all of that if you get it done, you're pretty ripe for fraud, is on the shoulder, the little devil that says, you know what? Joe over there or Sue over there is making more money than you are. You deserve this. The rationalization of why I should do that. Now, if I rationalize this good, I have the opportunity to steal it, and I have the financial need. Yeah, you're pretty ripe for fraud, and that's what we found happened in this case. The gentleman wasn't making. He was working long hours, small organization. He was the one that compiled the code. He had all the keys to the kingdom to be able to pull it off. And he had a financial need, and his brother wanted to get some extra money to possibly leave his wife, and also his best friend who helped him had just gone through a major lawsuit and lost $2 million. So all of those pressures together created this fraud, and that's why oversight is so important, which has changed since then. People ask, well, that was done with a computer. Are balls safe with all these other organizations? And lotteries do billions and billions of draws every year across the world. And I know of only maybe 4 or 5 out of the last 40 years where there was a major fraud done by an internal person. There's so many checks and balances with these lottery tickets. There was one that was in 1985, I think, in Pennsylvania. And what that was the draw officer and one other person had ping pong balls, and they took the balls out and they put latex paint on the inside and swished it around. So everything but 2s and 4s did not go up and come out the hole, right? So then they bought all the combos of 2s and 4s and won. But they got caught because the organized crime were also using those numbers, and somebody spotted the TV show and they knew something was screwy. The other one was in Milan, where they had harder balls, but they would either freeze them or heat them. They had their nephews and nieces drawing the balls, and they just say, hey, just grab the hot ones, or the cold ones, or the slick ones, or whatever they put on the balls. So there are very, very few frauds, especially when you have oversight checks and balances. And a lot of things have changed since the fraud I'm talking about happened. And I feel pretty comfortable with playing the lottery today.
So which one do you think is a bit more lower risk, the computer or the balls?
Good question. Actually, it's about the same. You've got risk, and the reason you have risks on that, and you'd have risks on however you draw them, if you were flipping a coin, whatever, you're dealing with a lot of money. You're dealing with millions, I mean, billions of dollars in lottery. So there's always temptation. So you need those checks and balances. And the temptation is so great that people may try to go to lengths. And if you're a security person for a lottery, you're always trying to figure out how someone else might be able to beat your system. And so you would be thinking about, well, I wonder if I tried this, whether it would work. And that's kind of how this worked, because we didn't have those checks and balances, which, by the way, have been changed so that nobody can do this same deal again.
So you also ran a lot of startups too. So you're a successful entrepreneur in many people's eyes. So how do you think people here, young people, can also succeed in startups?
Sure. I started out, and I think my family always worked for someone else. Even my dad, who was, if you're a farmer, you're an entrepreneur in your own way. But he didn't have the money to buy a farm. He cash rented, so he shared with someone. I started out as an employee, and I think, to me, if you have an idea and you think it can be successful, you want to just keep working on it. But seems like you always need some sort of cash to get going. So my recommendation is go to work for an industry you think you might want to start a business in. Go to work for that industry, learn everything you can, continue to pile that money, but at the same time, start your business. Do your business on nights and weekends, something that is unique, different, that can reach a market that you think is important. And then as you start making money on that business, wait until you've got enough money that you can live on to change on it. That way, if you got kids and family, you're not just bankrupting and throwing away all of your money. Then once you have the success and you start your own company, you take calculated risks. And as you make money, the big companies, Procter & Gamble's, all those, always have a little budgeted in research and development. And what I like, if you ever see an entrepreneurial curve in a business college, it starts down here. You like banana ice cream. Okay. So you start a banana ice cream company. You've done the research. If you hit 100, you're going to make a lot of money. So here you go. You hit 100, but at some point you will always level off. You've sold everybody who likes banana ice cream all the banana ice cream you can, or somebody competes with you at that point. If you don't continue to innovate, you're going to lose. So you take that little bit. And what I always figured is, when I make money on a project or a new company, I take 10% and I put it aside. And some people use it for gambling. Some use it for, I suppose, drugs, whatever. But I use it for new startups. What could I do that's just absolutely crazy that if I lose it, I'm still going to have 90% of my money to continue, and I'm going to be okay. And I think successful people that I've dealt with have always figured out how to put money aside and keep money so they don't always have to bet the bank. And too many, I think, entrepreneurs often think, well, I'm just going to bet that all of my life savings and everything I have on this one idea today, because I know it's going to work. And I tell them, you know what? Failure is truly the first step to success, but you got to have enough cash to try the second idea, the second step. If you think about a little kid, when they first get started, they are learning how to walk. They pull themselves up on a couch or a chair, and they take the first step. And inevitably what happens? Boom, they fall on their face. But they're dumb enough, because they haven't failed before, to crawl up and take 2, maybe 3, 4, 5 steps. And all of a sudden, they're running all over the place. So you want to encourage people to try something. It's better to have tried and failed than succeed at doing nothing, and have the resources to try the second and third time and not just give up. One final example here in this idea of starting out. Can you imagine, many of you and your viewers, watchers, listeners probably maybe have worked with a company where people have tried something and they have project managers, and project managers and accountants are notorious about, okay, we've got this much, we're going to budget that on this date we need to have this many sales, this date we have to do this date we have to do that, and blah, blah, blah. And then down here we'll be successful. And if you think about it, back when we sent 3 men to the moon, most people don't realize if they'd have followed that model, we'd have never made it. We would have failed, because over 90% of the time they were off course. They said 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if they were led by a project manager, they'd say, okay, we'll see you in 2 weeks because we planned everything out. It's going to work. Nope. They were correcting that course over 90% of the time. And too many people after the first failure just give up. And you don't want to do that. I mean, we have all failed. I have so many successful friends. And whenever I talk to them, they all have failures personally and professionally in their life, but they learned how to learn from those and be able to take the next step. So I think that's step number one. Step number two is always have a bundle of ideas so that you can have one or two going at the same time. So that if you're the person who creates a CD or a cassette, and 2 years from now, those are gone, nobody ever uses them anymore, you've got 2 or 3 projects going, so that curve I mentioned where it flattens off, people die, people move, technology changes, you've got to have 2 or 3 products so you're continue the growth as you do that. So those are a couple of lessons I learned and I believe strongly in as I do my speeches.
You mentioned having a bundle of ideas, and you also kind of call yourself the idea dude, which I find quite interesting as well. And you mentioned that quite a bit.
I'm trying to feel young and hip. I'm not really. I'm an old white guy with bald, and I'm just trying to think of ways to do this. But here's the theory. What I kind of learned in managing people in that is that, and I learned this when I went to wine country one time, because I thought that people who grew wine just went out back, picked their grapes, and had the award-winning bottle of wine. No, the people who make wine go across the valley, because every year the grapes are grown differently. And they take a bushel basket and they try all these different grapes. And the same thing happens when you separate in a brainstorming session or getting your ideas. You want to have, I always say, you take 15 minutes and just write down and talk to your other friends and everybody else, and no judgment. Every idea is a good idea. You write down every idea. You try to get 100 ideas in 15 to 20 minutes on what you want to work on. And you set it aside. You don't think about it. You don't evaluate it, because too many people let the no-mans. If you're meeting with your friends or your boss and you say, hey, how about we paint the wall yellow just for something different? And then you look around and people are going, somebody will go, no, man, we've tried that. That's not going to work. And all of a sudden you get discouraged. You write every idea down, because the accountants and the lawyers, are going to say, nope, you're going to get sued, or that's going to cost too much. No, you want their ideas too. You want everybody's ideas. You put that in that bushel basket, put it off the side, and then you come back, and that's where the decisions are made. Then you dare to act. So many people come up with an idea but are afraid to act on it. So daring to act means that you get your best group around and you let the accountant say the cost, you let the lawyers talk about legal, operations say we don't have enough people, whatever they are up and down, but you prioritize those 100 ideas. And the ones that are at the top, everybody around the table go, yeah, we prioritize that. Those are the ones we all like. You're a lot more successful when everybody's on the team doing it than you would be that. The other thing that we developed, and it was purely because I was working for a government agency, and in government agencies, you can imagine that you like to protect your job. So back to, it's better to have tried and failed project than to succeed at doing nothing. People often think government folk, they just want to succeed at doing nothing. Let me get my job. Let me get to my retirement and I'm done. I love trying new things, because that's where the success is. In fact, we talked, I think that it's more fun. It's kind of my cocaine. Having success, you just can't beat that feeling. When you have it, you want it, more of it. You want to try it again. And if you do a risk assessment, so that when you try something new, you assess what's the best one with the risk, so I don't lose my money. you obviously you take the next step. But anyway, I'm sitting here in giving ideas. Hey, let's put animals on lottery tickets. Let's do this. Let's do that. And I could just see the staff start to crumble. I couldn't figure out why. And they said, well, we just can't do all this. And oh, wait a minute. I'm just giving you an idea. I didn't say we need to do it. So we set up parameters and rules, and we came up with something called COT. And here's how it works. If you're sending an email to someone, you write down action required. That means I'm the boss. You better do it. This is job changing if you don't do it. That's maybe 1-2% of the things you send out. The second one is FYI. You know what that means? For your information. So yeah, read it, get to know it. It's important, but not that big a deal to do right now. And the last one, which I try to use more and more often, is COT, which means consider or throw away. It really is for individuals to put in that, or as I'm talking to someone to say, hey, this is a consider or toss, throw away idea. It gives you a chance to say an idea with no reactions, just to start. And the rules are, you can't say yes or no, that's a good idea. I just want you to know it. And if you don't have time to read it or think about it, throw it away. That's fine. It doesn't anything. I just need to get it off my chest. What that does is create a whole new environment where not only could I do and give them information, not worrying about them, whether it bothered them, they got worried about it, they had to do it right now, but they started sending me more ideas, and they weren't worried about, am I going to be fired because this is a stupid idea? Especially all the way down to the receptionist at the front desk who deals with all of the new customers coming up with ideas. And so all of a sudden we had this whole new positive theory of creativity. And that's getting those ideas in the bushel basket, very diverse, because it isn't, if you're brainstorming with people and they all look the same as you do, you've lost a whole market. There's such a huge market with the internet today. You want to have as much diversity as you can as you're doing all of these ideas. And then getting back together, prioritizing them, and that's when you act. So that's kind of the two-step process I'd recommend.
That consider or throw away thing is absolutely amazing, because when you think about it, it basically just makes it so, I think it addresses an issue where we try to be critics in every single idea that comes about. And
it's because we don't like change sometimes. And think about that receptionist. That receptionist probably knew that her idea of the day would be that chair in the front lobby that the customers sit on is stained. It's about to break. It's a huge liability. But when they've done an idea before, they probably wrote it up on a piece of paper and put it in the suggestion box, afraid to just go directly to the boss. And maybe 2 weeks later, someone took that out and sent it to here, to send it to there, tried to get a cost appraisal. By that time, that same employee is down in the break room saying, I gave them an idea and management never listens to us. This way, they can just get on the computer and go COT. They know they're not going to get a response. That helps me as the boss, because I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want to have them think anything's a dumb idea. So they can send it and not care, except to say, I got it off my chest and I got to tell them what I thought.
Okay. Now, you mentioned something else as well that I also found pretty interesting. How does one develop an innovative mindset?
I think it's the encouragement. Our supervisors, our friends, it's getting rid of the nomad. Back to you mentioned, you hit the nail right on the head of the idea that we are taught, even in the political world we're involved in today, to be negative right out of the chute, rather than say, that's a good idea. Now, when little kids start to walk, little kids are trying new things, we laugh and think, that's cute, right? Well, if we do the same thing with our friends and everybody who comes up with an idea and say, yeah, that's a good idea. And how about this? And how about that? It is encouragement. And I think I got that early on with my family, with my mom and dad, and my uncle. They were, we had a lot of laughs. We did that. But when I tried something, they would encourage it. Or if it was a baseball team, well, go try it. See what you think. And if it didn't work, they said, well, you tried, at least you tried something. And I think that encouragement is probably the answer to it, Jimbo.
Excellent. And the next thing is skill set versus mindset. Which one do you think is more important?
Probably mindset. My degree, after all the talking and going to school, I have a BS in speech, if you can believe that. So I think that mindset of determination, Good quote that you bring it up. Henry Ford once said, he was on trial. They thought he was stupid because he was not, I don't know, good, on trial for something. That how dare you make this or that? And he said, look, they asked him what the president of Zimbabwe or some country in Africa was. And he said, look, I can pay a nickel to any kid to go find that out. My job is to create new ideas. And I think that's the mindset. I am not that smart, but I always try to surround myself with successful people. And I try to do what I can if I've got an idea and I need expertise in something, I hire it. And especially entrepreneurs, when you start, people say, well, I can't afford hire a full-time lawyer or whatever. No. Put an advisory board together. People love to give advice to people to be successful. And so you get a lawyer and an accountant to give you ideas. And then when you start making money, you cut them in on the profits rather than paying them full-time the whole time. Many people do that, and many people make a lot of money doing that, but you have that deal. And by the way, when you have people who are investors or employees, you automatically get critics. That's why many entrepreneurs, I suggest, because as an entrepreneur, usually you're a poor manager. You're great on the ideas and seeing the farsightedness, but actually execution day to day on legal, on accounting, on sales, on all the other stuff, and that most aren't have that same expertise. You want to surround yourself with a good idea and the diversity of ideas, back to ideas, so that you get as broad of an audience buying your product as possible.
Yeah, that's a really big point, because most entrepreneurs are generally visionaries. And sometimes that can create a disconnect because, well, to fix the disconnect, you mentioned it there, it's better to just save money and work with experts part-time rather than, do full-time. So yeah, that's really interesting.
It takes a lot of time to manage people. And I tried, when I came out in my own company, I tried to do jobs for hire on everything we did for TV, because you didn't know, I'd get 2-3 projects in a month and then not have a project for 2 or 3 months. So I'd be out selling for the next one. Well, if you have a bunch of overhead, you can't last very long. If you job it out and you do work for hire, you last a lot longer. That's usually how the TV and movie business works.
Now, you've learned a lot of lessons, and you kind of pushed out some gems there. But what were some very key big lessons you learned while being an entrepreneur?
I think manage your cash flow. You have no idea if you're starting out. When I did production and did these projects, when I worked for the cable company before we were bought out, I didn't realize that you had to pay for insurance and overhead and, the electricity and all that sort of stuff. And when you're in your own business, you got to pay for it all. You've got to look for it all. So there's never enough cash in a business. And then the second is, I mentioned earlier, is taking some of the money when you do have profits and say, oh my God, I just made a whole bunch of money, so I'm going to go buy my new car, and I'm going to buy, is putting a percentage of that away for new projects and also for the rainy day fund when things are light. Then you can operate and be around for a lot longer in the business. So I think cash flow, money is always top of mind of any entrepreneur. And I never, ever wanted to think that I had to go to the bank and declare bankruptcy or do anything else. So I waited until I had some money in the bank and then just took a portion of it, figuring that if I ever got back to zero, I'd go do something else and I'd still have lots of money. So I think often, and that's a lot like gambling, isn't it? You go to the craps table and you play and you win, and you could walk away with it, but man, that was fun. So I'm going to keep betting. And then all of a sudden you get down to zero. And I just know that if I pull out another 100 or another 1,000 to bet, I can win it all back. People don't. So the big lesson I learned in the gaming business is that to play and to gamble, what you want to do is say, today I'm going to spend X amount of dollars. I'm going to spend $50, $100, whatever you can afford to lose. And I'm going to call that my entertainment money, and I'm going to go play it. And it may play for 20 minutes. It may play all day. But if I lose that much money, I'm done. And if you can walk away, you've had some fun, you've had some entertainment, and you feel a lot better the next morning when you wake up that you still have some money, and you just use money you knew you would lose or could lose. If you didn't, you might have spent it on another show or on something else.
Okay. And considering this modern age today, we have a lot of big leaders in business now. What do you sort of see in the future of business leaders today?
Well, there's no doubt that business leaders there's a much bigger demand in companies for diversity of ideas, diversity of audience. Again, the old days of decision making, being the head of household and that's it, were long gone. We have a whole new, and it's not so much you could still do that, but you're missing out on opportunity because there is so many more people who are making decisions today, and with the internet that can make the decision, that you really want to focus toward that. So I see leadership, I see workforce, a lot more. The working at home, I think, is somewhat of a fad. I think the people who will excel in management will continue to work in person, or try to work the majority of their time in person, because how else do you develop the skills for people to know you, to be promoted, or to want to invest in you if they aren't there watching your work ethic and how you work and where you work. So I think I see us going back to the people who want to be successful do that. People that work at home will be able to find a niche and be able to do their thing really well, but they'll be often working for others in that sense. I guess those are some thoughts.
Okay. And speaking of sort of business leaders, who do you think were some of your personal career influences?
There are a variety. Johnny Carson was the one that really pulled me up over the top. I got to go be on his show, and he's actually was born in my state in the early days, but he had a personality that could relate to anybody. And I haven't met anybody that I really, I like them all. I like to meet people. I like to learn new things. And I think he exemplifies that. He could bring out the best of anybody, and he made a lot of money, and he was a good business person on top of it. Ted Turner was another one that was really unique. Now, he was on the scale of just nuts. I mean, the guy was just nuts. He would try anything, do anything, say anything. And he probably wasn't the most tactful in what he did and how he said it, but he was probably one of the most unique entrepreneurs I've ever met. Now he owns probably more ranch land than anybody in the world. I mean, the guy was just fun to be afar and to watch, and actually be able to do some business interactions with him. Interesting dude for sure. The others are fun female business leaders that you probably don't know the names of, but who have helped talk, but basically had work ethics that matched mine, which was, we're going to have some bad days. I'll get upset, but I'm not going to get upset and do personal attacks at people. They would lead. They would always be ready to go. They always had their projects done. And that's kind of the respect you have as you go into business. You got to decide, you want to be true to yourself. And back to my point about trying to relax. A guy named Damon John, who's on Shark Tank, black guy on Shark Tank, great guy. I did an event with him a couple months ago, and he had something that I learned that I thought was really unique. Here he is making all this money, making decisions on $1 million ideas. I think he did the FUBU tennis shoes, if I'm not mistaken. But basically, he had a list, and I said, "What's the list for?" And I figured he had all these $1 million ideas. He said, "No." He said, I have a list that at night I look at, and then in the morning I wake up and change again. 5 things I'm going to do for myself today. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. So, I'm going to have my cereal that I really enjoy this morning, because that's going to get me in a mood to be successful. Or I'm going to take my kids to school, or I'm going to go listen to this concert or listen to this music. He's going to do 5 things for himself, which puts him in the state of mind to help everybody else. And I think that, just in a simple sense, is very entrepreneurial and very, very, very positive.
Okay.
One more story I'll tell you. I can give advice, but I try to listen, just like because of your podcast, somebody might be inspired to think of something with what we've said today. I heard a couple of gentlemen from Life is Good T-shirt company kind of stick men on it. And they were having trouble when they first started the company because all of these were all 18 to 24-year-old employees would come in and then hear everybody say, yeah, I have to go to this meeting. I have to get this project done. So they called everybody in and they came up with an idea. And here's the idea. They said, the word have is gone in our vocabulary. You cannot say have in this room anymore. We're going to say get. So when they come in and say, I get to go to this meeting. That's right, because you're an employee, you're valued, and you're going to get to have your input on this project. I get to do this project. Yep, because you're being paid well and we're doing well. And so changing from have to get within an business environment, they said, the entire culture from negative to positive. Isn't that fun?
And I think that falls back into gratitude, It's
good point.
Cherishing what you have, or what you get,
Yeah.
Okay. So this has been a beautiful interview. And just to kind of wrap this up, you wrote a book called The $80 Million Gamble, I believe. And
that's correct.
Also, let's talk a little bit about that. But additionally, what types of services do you offer as well?
I do some consulting, management consulting, but what I really enjoy is if somebody has a big conference going on, they need a keynote speaker. I have two speeches, the $80 billion gamble. And what that means is that the lottery industry sells $80 billion a year in tickets. Now that was in 2018. Today, I think it's like $98 billion. That's more than all the movie income, all the music income, all the sports ticket revenue combined. That's how many lottery tickets are sold. So the gamble was whether we'd solve that lottery fraud or not. So this tells the inside story of that lotto fraud and how a ticket, hot dog, and Bigfoot helped solve that lottery gig. The other is dare to dream, dare to act. And that's some of the basic principles we've been talking about for entrepreneurship and coming up with the new ideas. But those just complement the speeches that I do. And I have terryspeaks.com, pretty easy to remember, TERRY speaks.com. is the website, and it has all the contact information and shows some examples. But it's just the greatest gig in the world as a retired person, because I take the ones I want to and travel the rest of the time and just really, hopefully, find that American dream of enjoying life.
Excellent.
And I expect to see you doing this, Jimbo, when I'm in my grave and you're doing the next all of the great things that are happening.
Well, again, back to you here. This has been, an amazing, interview. I personally learned a lot, and I hope, the people that watch this also learn a lot too. Do you have any kind of concluding words or pieces of knowledge you would like to give?
I think back to don't be afraid to volunteer for anything. That's in my opinion, no matter what you're doing, how you're doing it. And the other is let's help each other and let's keep our world a friendly and fun place. That's what I enjoy. And doing things like this with you is really very rewarding to me. And in my years where some people want to just go hibernate somewhere and rock in a chair, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to see if we can't continue to help people. And it looks like you're doing the same thing with this podcast. So thank you.
Mr. Rich, you're a motivation. All right.
You know what, though, Jimbo? Not once did you call me a son of a rich.
Son of a rich.
Can we say that? I don't know. I guess we did, didn't we? Yeah. It was fun.
Definitely. So, just to quickly end this off, I just have to do a few shout outs here.
Sure. Absolutely.
First thing I would like to mention is LifeWork Systems. This is our affiliate partner, Judy Ryan. She's essentially an HR superstar. She works in HR businesses and helps to sort of improve their infrastructure and make it a better collegial environment. And then the next thing is sort of our YouTube channel. Subscribe now. We're slowly growing in its subscribers. And again, ring that bell. Final thing, second to final thing, the Roku channel. This is going to be on Roku TV as well as our other episodes as well. So you could just check out that Roku channel on our website, or you can get a Roku box. They're pretty cheap too. Don't get it just for this show. They have a lot of great shows. But yeah, check out our Roku channel down there. And now the final thing, we're also opening up Jimbo Paris services. So essentially, I act as a consultant and a service provider. I'm working with General Electric right now, and I am providing them with exclusive content so that they can market to a specific audience that they're interested in. So if you need someone like me to gear marketing towards what specific audience you want and make content for you, check me out. All right. I'm Jimbo Paris, and this is the Jimbo Paris Show. Thank you again. Thank you for listening to the Jimbo Paris Show.